What if all 3 of Daenerys' dragons had been killed by the Night King? If you're a Game of Thrones lover, then you probably know the Night King manages to take down one of Daenerys' dragons. But what if he didn't stop there? What if he killed all 3? We all remember Season 7, Episode 6, Beyond the Wall. Jon Snow and his men take on the White Walkers and the army of the dead. And just when things look hopeless, Daenerys shows up with her 3 dragons to save the day. But then, the unthinkable happens. The Night King casually grabs an ice spear, throws it like a pro, and kills Viserion. Yeah, we were all screaming at our screens. Night King touches Viserion, and his eyes turn blue. Just like that, Dany loses one of her dragons, and the dead gain their scariest weapon yet. But now, imagine this. What if the Night King didn't stop there? What if he took down Rhaegal and Drogon too? Let's dive in and see how things would have gone down if Daenerys lost all 3 of her dragons. So, let's suppose when the Night King attacked and killed Viserion, Daenerys went full rage mode, losing it completely. We've all seen how attached she is to her dragons, right? I mean, they're like her children. So when Viserion got speared right out of the sky, you know she was not about to let the Night King get away with that. No way. She decides to attack with the 2 remaining dragons. And the Night King, being the mastermind that he is, was just waiting for that perfect moment. As Daenerys zoomed in on him with Drogon and Rhaegal, the Night King strikes again, killing the 2 remaining dragons as well. So, what happens to Daenerys, the mother of dragons, or, in this scenario, the former mother of dragons? Losing Viserion was bad enough, but losing Drogon and Rhaegal too? That's a huge loss. Dany's dragons weren't just weapons, they were her babies. She raised them from little scaly nuggets to massive fire-breathing beasts. So when the Night King kills all 3, she's not just angry, she's broken. She's screaming, crying, and probably cursing High Valyrian. Who does Dany blame for this disaster? Jon Snow, of course. In her mind, this whole mess is his fault. He dragged her to the north, convinced her to fight his war, and now her dragons are dead. She's not just mad at Jon, she's furious. Without her dragons, she would have been forced into hand-to-hand combat, something she's not exactly trained for. She's the mother of dragons, not the mother of sword fights. So imagine her, sword in hand, trying to hold her own against an army of undead whites, while also trying to figure out how to deal with an ice-cold monster who can raise the dead. Honestly, that doesn't sound too promising for our queen. If the Night King had taken out her dragons, Daenerys would have been just another mortal in the war, with nothing but her anger and desperation to fuel her. And we all know that rage doesn't win battles when you're facing the likes of the Night King. She could have fought bravely, but without her dragons, it would have been almost impossible for her to pull off a victory. It would have been an even bigger disaster for Jon Snow too. I mean, the guy was already struggling when he had dragons on his side. Without them, he would have been out there, standing alone in the middle of the battlefield, with nothing but his sword and his strong sense of duty to keep him going. But that's not going to stop an army of undead. When the dragons go down, Jon's immediate reaction is pure panic. He's on Rhaegal when the dragon gets speared, and he barely survives the crash. Now, he's on the ground, surrounded by whites, with no dragon backup. Jon's a great fighter, but even he can't take on an entire army of the undead by himself. He's swinging Longclaw like a man possessed, but it's not enough. The Night King is closing in, and Jon's starting to realize that this might be the end. Jon, being Jon, he doesn't give up. He rallies the remaining fighters, Tormund, Brienne, Jaime, whoever's still standing, and leads a desperate charge against the Night King. It's a classic Jon Snow move. Charge headfirst into danger, hope for the best, and maybe die heroically in the process. But without dragons, the odds are stacked against him. In this timeline, Jon doesn't make it. He sacrifices himself to buy time for the others to retreat, and the Night King raises him as a wight. Zombie Jon Snow is now leading the army of the dead, and it's the most tragic thing since Hodor held the door. With Winterfell lost, the North falls to the Night King. The Night King's army overruns the castle, and the living are forced to retreat. The survivors, Arya, Sansa, Tyrion, and a handful of others, flee south, hoping to regroup. But with 3 undead dragons now under the Night King's control, the situation looks hopeless. So, what happens next? But before we talk about what happens to Cersei and the South, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It helps us grow and make more such content for you. Now, let's get into it. When the news reaches King's Landing that the North has fallen, Cersei's first reaction is probably to pour herself a giant glass of wine and pretend it's not happening. She's the queen of denial after all. But as reports flood in about the Night King's army growing larger with every village they destroy, even Cersei can't ignore the reality. She's not stupid. She knows what's coming. But instead of preparing for the fight, she does what she does best. She schemes. Cersei's plan? Hide in the Red Keep and let everyone else deal with the problem. She's got the Golden Company, she's got Qyburn's creepy experiments, and she's got Euron Greyjoy's fleet. Though, let's be honest, Euron's more interested in flirting with her than actually fighting. Cersei's convinced that the Night King won't make it past the Riverlands, but she's wrong. The Night King doesn't care about castles or armies. He's coming for everyone, and he's bringing an icy apocalypse with him. When the dead finally reach King's Landing, Cersei's carefully laid plans fall apart faster than a Lannister marriage. The Golden Company? Useless against an army that doesn't stay dead. Euron's fleet? Frozen solid in the Blackwater Bay. Qyburn's zombies? Pathetic compared to the Night King's wights. Cersei's last stand is as dramatic as you'd expect. She's standing on the balcony of the Red Keep, wine glass in hand, watching as the city falls around her. In her final moments, she realizes that all her power, all her scheming, meant nothing in the end. The Night King doesn't even bother killing her himself. He just lets the Whites do the job. Cersei Lannister, the woman who always played the game to win, dies as just another victim of the Long Night. Tyrion, the witty little mastermind, would have tried to keep his head above water by offering strategic advice and cracking jokes to keep morale up. But let's be real, he's not exactly the type to stand on the front lines wielding a sword against Whites. Without dragons, Tyrion would have had to fall back on his brains to keep him alive. But even his sharp mind can only get him so far. With the North gone and King's Landing in ruins, the rest of Westeros doesn't stand a chance. The Night King's army marches through the Riverlands, the Vale, and the Reach, growing larger with every village they destroy. The lords of Westeros try to rally their forces, but without dragons, they're hopelessly outmatched. The Night King doesn't just want to conquer Westeros, he wants to turn it into a frozen wasteland. In the end, the entire world falls to darkness. The Night King's victory is complete. The living are either dead or turned into whites, and the world is a frozen, lifeless wasteland. The long night lasts forever, and the songs and stories of the living are forgotten. The Night King sits on the Iron Throne, not as a conqueror, but as the bringer of the end. In this alternate timeline, the death of Daenerys' dragons changes everything. Without them, the living don't stand a chance against the Night King. Cersei's scheming Tyrion's wit and the bravery of the remaining heroes aren't enough to stop the icy apocalypse. The world falls to darkness, and the Night King reigns supreme. So, is there any possible way in which the forces of Winterfell could have defeated the Night King without dragons? Well, it's not entirely impossible, though it would have been a massive challenge. The Night King and his army were a terrifying force, but the characters we grew to love had a few tricks up their sleeves, and with some clever thinking, they could have still pulled off a victory. For one, the Stark family had a deep connection to the North and its ancient magic. Bran, being the three-eyed raven, had access to a wealth of knowledge, and he could have used his powers to explore the past and find a way to weaken or even destroy the Night King. The Night King's power came from his creation by the Children of the Forest. So what if Bran had used his abilities to go back in time and somehow alter that key moment? Maybe he could have stopped the Night King from being created in the first place, or at least disrupted his power somehow. It would have been a risky move, and Bran would have been putting himself in danger. But it's possible that Bran's deep connection to magic could have been the key to saving everyone. If he had figured out how to sever the Night King's connection to his army before the battle began, it would have made things much easier for the living. Now, without dragons, the next best thing would have been the weapons they had: Valyrian steel and dragonglass. These two materials were the only things known to kill whites and White Walkers, and while they were rare, they weren't completely impossible to find. Jon, Arya, Brienne, and even Sam all had Valyrian steel weapons, and if they had worked together to take out the White Walkers one by one, they could have weakened the army. The Night King had a connection to the Whites, so by eliminating his commanders, they might have been able to scatter his forces. It wouldn't have been easy, but it was something they could have tried. With a little luck, they might have been able to bring down the Night King's strongest lieutenants, causing chaos in his ranks. Another possible strategy could have involved the power of magic. Melisandre, the Red Priestess, had already shown she had the ability to use fire to fight the undead. She might have been able to use her connection to R'hllor, the Lord of Light, to help turn the tide. If she had summoned fire spells or used her magic to raise the spirits of fallen soldiers, it could have provided some much-needed backup for the living. Then there's the possibility of Jon Snow or another key figure going after the Night King himself. The Night King was a huge threat, but if someone like Jon had taken the risk of charging straight into his army and facing him head-on, it could have made a difference. We saw how determined Jon was throughout the series, and he was willing to sacrifice himself for the greater good. If he had gone for the Night King directly, with his Valyrian steel sword, he might have been able to destroy the Night King, and in doing so, end the entire war. It would have been a suicide mission, but Jon Snow was no stranger to such risks. In the end, if they had taken out the Night King himself, the Whites would have fallen apart without their leader. Of course, there's always the possibility of getting a little help from unexpected places. The Hound, Sandor Clegane, was a wild card. Though he wasn't a magician or a great strategist, he was tough as nails and had no problem charging into danger. If the Hound had used his brutal, no-holds-barred fighting style, he might have caused enough of a distraction to allow Jon or Arya to land the killing blow on the Night King. The Hound was strong and reckless, which could have worked in their favor if he managed to draw attention away from the more important fights. He could have been the ultimate distraction while the others took care of business. Lastly, there's the chance that they could have used the Whites against the Night King. In a world of magic and chaos, it's not outside the realm of possibility that someone could have figured out a way to turn the Whites' own power against their leader. Bran might have been able to use his knowledge of the past to find a way to disrupt the Night King's control over the Whites. Perhaps he could have found a way to break the bond between the Night King and his army, turning them into mindless zombies once again. If that had happened, the Whites would have been easy to defeat without the added strength of their commanding officers. So, while it might have been nearly impossible to defeat the Night King without dragons, it's not totally out of the question that they could have pulled it off. What do you think would happen in this timeline? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Game of Thrones what ifs. Thanks for watching.